If you were building before 2017, if people in the space who knew you back then and know you now will vouch for you in this very trustless space, that trust still matters a lot. The good news is you can always earn back trust through your actions. But I think we're going to be a lot more reluctant about how we give trust to new actors, given what we've seen, not just from SBF, but many other actors over the last couple of years.
All right, guys, I'm here today with the founder of the Secret Foundation, Tor Bear, a project that's privacy coin built on Cosmos, correct?
Yeah, I say privacy platform because we're like a dApp blockchain, but yeah, we're a Cosmos chain, part of that interchain ecosystem for sure.
Yeah. Now, the reason why I have you on the show is you guys have had some interactions with FTX, obviously. We've been interviewing projects. There's been a bad track record for what FTX and Alameda had done to a lot of projects. The project sides have known this for a long time, and we're just figuring all this out. And so wanted to bring you on. I know we were on Twitter Spaces together, and I liked what you had to say. And I was like, okay, as soon as you start talking, I said, oh, this guy knows. This guy knows what happened, what was going on there at FTX. So just tell us a little bit about your interaction with FTX and Alameda. And were you guys spot listed on there?
No, never spot, only perps. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. There's a scam right there.
I hesitate to say that that's like the beginning and the end of. I mean, they would call it a profitable trading strategy, right?
Yeah.
They wouldn't say scam, they wouldn't say exploit, and that's certainly not like the worst thing that they were doing, right? The worst thing is they were using customer deposits. Let's be very clear. That's the worst thing. But how it impacted the projects, sure, we're not alone. It impacted every project, I think, at least indirectly with the market collapse, but directly a lot of projects were hurt by that. And fortunately, we didn't, have any treasury held on that exchange. We weren't one of the platforms that were forced to keep our own money on the FTX platform or anything like that. So it hasn't hurt us really substantially at all. But the affiliation and the downstream effects and the effect it's had on some of my very close friends, definitely there's been an impact.
That's what to me people are really discounting, especially when you have people like Kevin O'Leary coming out and saying, well, I don't think he's a bad guy. People have had their lives and projects ruined by what happened there on an individual level. And yet Sam is still out there in the Bahamas. He's still doing whatever he wants at this point. We'll see how much longer that continues. But the fact is that there are real people that got hurt in this carnage. And, you bring up the perpetual futures. When it comes to your project that goes along with your foundation, it's like, you look at what happened to ICP. That's how they crashed that price completely. So with them doing the perpetual futures, what kind of effect did that have on your project? Did you know they were listing it and then it just happened, or can you walk us through that process?
What happened for us is Alameda wanted to participate in an announcement that we made earlier this year, 2022. We announced that we had a large pool of funds that wanted to support our application ecosystem. And that was a major announcement because the sum of all of those commitments to the ecosystem was something like $225 million, all for secret app development. And Alameda was one of the firms that made the biggest commitment. And as a project, when you hear them say that, and they say the things that obviously projects want to hear, whether you believe them or not, but they say the things where it's like, we're going to make you the next Solana. We're going to scale this ecosystem. We get your ethos. We share your mission. They're going to say everything they need to do to close that kind of deal, and they'll make that commitment. But realistically, what it turned out was all of these, hedge funds and VCs clothing, it does have a negative impact on the project ultimately, because you come to realize that they're really only in it for themselves. And what they generally did for projects where they had any kind of position or exposure, right, is that they try to get back to, if not delta neutral, they try to hedge. And the best way to hedge is list your own perps on an exchange where clearly now we know there was no Chinese wall between these FTX and Alameda operations. So you just take a very leveraged short exposure position against a spot position on other exchanges, and you just trade that down and you ride the waves of the market, and you do end up with a dominant market position. You end up controlling, essentially. You have market power over these illiquid coins. Now, if at the time that this had all happened, Secret had been a top 20 coin, right? You couldn't give one firm market power. And even though Alameda never controlled any significant portion of the secret supply, right? They were tiny in the grand scheme of things, unlike some projects where they maybe held like 5 to 10% of the treasury. But that was never, it was much smaller than that in our case. Then, even with that, the illiquidity on major sexes, especially as liquidity started to drain over the course of 2022, that gave them even more market power. My understanding is where they got in trouble was keeping a delta long position on the entire market, not on any particular coin. So eventually they just ended up, especially with the Luna collapse, having too much exposure at the end of the day. You know, when that collapses on itself, that black hole effect, that kills everybody, whether you're a good project, bad project, whether they own 10% of your supply, 0.1% of your supply, everybody craters together. And it's going to be a bit before we see the legitimate projects rise from those ashes, because with this level of illiquidity, everything goes down together first, and it takes some time for genuine buying interest to come back, restore the foundation of these projects, which from a technical perspective are fine, but from a liquidity perspective, you know, we're still working through the damage.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to go through. I think we're very close to what I would call the end of the contagion, where you are having like your first wave of these reverberating effects with companies going insolvent because they had too much in FTX, or they were in a company that had too much exposure to FTX, whatever it might be. I think in the short term, I think we're almost done. I think whenever we see if Genesis files bankruptcy or not, that'll have some reverberating effects one way or the other.
Yeah.
But in terms of the actual market and the actual projects and projects that aren't able to make it, I mean, we're still not even close to touching that. So I think the question is, I would have for you, you know, in crypto, we're all about anti-gatekeeping. We hate the word gatekeeping. We have a law in California that we're going after to kick down the gates and change accredited investor laws. But in crypto, when we use the word gatekeeper, we tend to think of someone who's stopping good people from coming in. But do you feel like we need some gatekeeping to keep the bad people from coming in? The stock market 2.0 people from coming in, your SBS, your Kevin O'Leary's, like these people are coming in and trying to transform this market into the traditional finance. Like, from somebody who obviously with what you guys do with a privacy platform, you're privacy focused, which I'm sure the way you look at things aligns with a lot of way that our audience looks at things. And so that stock market 2.0 stuff shouldn't jive with you. What are your thoughts on that? How do we keep this from happening again and keep those people out?
It's so tricky because when you talk about putting up gates and walls, what generally people are talking about is regulation of some manner. And we've talked, there was this sort of meme in the space. Are we capable of self-regulation? Can we have better public disclosures, things like that? Well, that's all well and good. But if there's no enforcement of any of this, if people can just lie kind of publicly, you know, things like proof of reserves, which, by the way, using a platform like Secret is perfect for, because it's like exchanges don't want to show off their accounts, but they want to prove they actually have their customer deposits in hand. Use a private smart contract, and you can prove exactly what you've got without, you know, doxing every wallet and every customer balance to all of your competitors. Like, that's the kinds of solutions we should be thinking and talking about.
I agree 100% with that.
When it comes to gatekeeping, and then we say maybe the regulators are good because they'll keep the bad actors out. In theory, it works. In practice, it doesn't. And this is like my favorite. I think it's a Yogi Berra quote, but nobody ever knows if he said anything, right? Where it's like the difference between theory and practice is, in theory, there's no difference, but in practice, there is.
That's hilarious.
This is exactly one of those cases where it's like, in theory, regulation could have prevented this, except that we saw in practice, it did the opposite. We had regulators asleep at the wheel going after things like library, you know, like trying to just build a nice YouTube platform for devs. And here we are with this massive multi-billion-dollar scheme unfolding globally, with FTX US wrapped up in it, now filing for bankruptcy as part of this global FTX group. So it's not like there's no blame there. And they're taking the meetings with the regulators. The regulators have access to these people, but they're just incapable of seeing through it because they're so used to regulating the legacy markets. In the legacy markets, this is exactly how it works. You go,
100%.
You meet with the regulators, they help you put up the walls. Regulatory capture is the most profitable strategy in every industry. Facebook did it for many, many years, and the consequences for privacy we're still working through. So unfortunately here, it's like, I would love to see fewer bad actors in our space, but realistically, it hasn't been the traditional gatekeepers keeping them out. It's the gatekeepers holding the gate open just long enough to see who's going to be able to give them the nice jobs on the other side of the revolving door when all is said and done. It's more people like Eric Voorhees
100%.
holding SBF to account.
Mm-hmm.
That's my version of like self-regulation. And I actually think that people in the media and maybe even people like yourself, the role you have to play to holding people to account, the amazing reporting job that CoinDesk did in originally breaking some of the balance sheet stories, that's the accountability that's been missing, I think, in the crypto space. We had a lot of sort of complicit media actors who have said, no longer, I'm not going to be complicit in this anymore, while traditional outlets like the New York Times are still complicit in building up these bad actors. So
I don't know if you know this, but do you know that the Alameda CEO, Sam Trabucco, former CEO before Sweet Caroline, did you know he worked for the New York Times while he worked at Alameda?
Oh, simultaneously?
Yeah,
Simultaneously, I did not know.
He is one of their crossword puzzle creators.
Oh, that's actually really funny. I do the New York Times crossword
I
every day.
I just found that out last night. I tweeted it out last night. Somebody sent me a bunch of information
Wow.
on it, connecting him, the person that runs a crossword department, talking about him on
Oh
Facebook.
my
And
God.
Sam
I'm gonna
Trabucco
have to
literally
go.
worked for the New York Times.
That is really funny. I wonder if he was leaving us literal clues along the way. He was like, it's like 6 across is just help me. 7 across is SBF has my family
No.
in the
Sam was
basement.
not saying help me. He's one of the biggest criminals out of the whole group for sure. So
Oh man.
yeah. Sam Trabucco is not a good. Brett Harrison, CEO of FTX.
Well, Brett's with me in Chicago.
Is he? Well,
Where
I'm
I'm
hearing
based.
he might be the
Yeah.
one that blew the whistle to CZ. That's what after he stepped
I
down.
won't say anything about Brett
Yeah,
except that I really like Brett and I think he's a
that's
very honest person. And I was very excited originally when FTX moved a lot of operations to
yeah.
Chicago because it's a big trading city. Brett's great. A lot of the people who've been working in Chicago are great. Jump is based here. DRW Cumberland is based here. There's a big crypto scene in Chicago. And when Brett left FTX, it didn't set off the alarm bells because everybody was so heads down in their own work. You don't think about it except in retrospect. But Brett, I always got a great impression from,
Yeah.
and he seems to still be committed to the space. I hear that he's still doing some good stuff next. So hopefully more actors like Brett and fewer actors like, well, remains to be seen how this all plays out and what we learn. But
Yeah.
clearly the wrong people were at the wheel.
Well, I don't know if you know, but Brett is actually kind of the step one for us discovering out the SBF was doing the federal bit license. That's what they were angling for.
Right.
So we come out with a story where we do a video explaining the process, how we went from Brett Harrison then to Mark Wetjen. And then they sat on our bill for 3 months and hid it from us and tried to sabotage us and then tried to steal our political backer. The day we came out with that story and explained the federal bit license that they were angling for, which is very clear that's what they were doing now. And I said it for 5 weeks before it became public. Brett got fired the next day or stepped down the next day. The next day after that video became public, it was the next day. And then he followed me on Twitter the very next day. So I definitely think maybe he was thinking about trying to tell me something. I don't know. I've sent some threatening messages to Brett over the last few weeks saying, if you don't tell us what side you're on, I'm going to dig. And so we've been digging and we haven't found anything but good stuff. It's been good stuff about him. So now I'm starting to hear he might have been the whistleblower. So
yeah, ethically speaking, I'll vouch for Brett. Whether or not he blew the whistle or anything else, I have zero knowledge of. But in all of our actions in Chicago, he struck me as somebody who, like you and like me, really cares about the long arc of adoption in the space. And that actually takes me to back to your question about gatekeeping, right? Like a lot of people have accused previously, like Brian Armstrong, for example, of not having the ethos of the space and like trying to do such and such with regulators. And I never saw that in his action. And the same thing with Kraken and like Jesse Powell.
Oh yeah, love Jesse Powell for sure.
Kraken is my primary exchange. I'm not paid to do this. If they want to sponsor me, there's no point. But Jesse and Brian, like by all accounts, have been doing amazing work on behalf of the industry. They understand when they talk with regulators and legislators, which again, I'm not painting with a broad brush here. Clearly, they're all different. They have different motivations. Some are compromised, some are not. Some are aligned, some are, aligned with the traditional banking industry. So regulator, legislator, this is not meant to say they all think equally or act equally. But when they interact with people in that particular political class, you can tell that they're thinking about the impact to their business, their people, their employees, but also the industry long term. Not because they're motivated to capture it or be the largest player in it, but because they want to continue to nurture that cypherpunk ethos, this sort of human empowerment ethos that started, like they were doing this before there was clear there was any money in it at all. And to think that they would now throw all of that away, that doesn't make sense to me. Whereas somebody who entered the space in like 2018, 2019, like SBF, gave interviews to Fortune and Bloomberg explicitly saying, I don't care about crypto. If I could make more money doing
Yep.
something else, you know the hell I
Absolutely.
would.
God, I
Like
hate those
it
guys.
should be so obvious who we can and shouldn't
Yeah.
trust. So the contagion in terms of how we respect the current representatives that we have in the space, let's not let ourselves get fooled and think all sex representatives are bad,
Did you
all
say porn? Did you
CEOs.
say porn stars?
Yes, clearly that's what I was saying.
A sex
I'm
representative. I like that. That's a good.
Brian
I'm going to
Armstrong
use
is
that from
a
now on. I'm going to take that from you.
notorious.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, let's CEX representatives like Brian and Jesse, et cetera. Like they really, I want, especially the longer they've been in the space. The longer somebody's been in the space and the more they seem to be respected by other people, that's my only heuristic left. If you were
Yeah.
building before 2017, if people in the space who knew you back then and know you now will vouch for you in this very trustless
Yeah.
space, that trust still matters a lot. The good news is you can always earn back trust through your actions. But I think we're going to be a lot more reluctant about how we give trust to new actors, given what we've seen, not just from SBF, but many other actors over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Well, Uncle Brian, as we call him on the channel, I can't make up my mind. I was hearing that he was involved in some of this stuff with SBF and the regulation side. So that's what I was hearing. And so, when my famous rant went viral, I said I put SBF and Brian Armstrong in the same category because that's what I was hearing. A couple of days later, it was like, well, maybe it wasn't as bad with him as it was with SBF. And I think for me, like, man, I'd really like to get Brian on the channel, but maybe I'll ask him at Thanksgiving this year. I think that the whole thing, though, is that I think Brian tries to play both sides. And I think that he tries to be friendly with the regulators. And he also, there's some ideals he wants to stick to. I will say, I was very impressed that he came out with a strong language and called SBF a criminal. Like, to me,
Yeah.
that was a moment where I was like, okay, nobody else is really out there saying this that's on your level other than, even CZ wasn't calling him a criminal. I don't think he used that language.
Right.
That's a hard word to use against somebody that's in your business, that's, your
Right.
direct competitor. And so I was very proud of Brian for coming out and saying that. So like when it comes to Brian, like he wants to play it both ways. Like if you look at the shows that he goes on, a lot of the shows he goes on, like the All In podcast, like
Right.
guys, the All In podcast guys were bragging about pumping and dumping Solana last year.
I
Like
remember that.
they're part of this. Like they're
That's
part of the
yeah.
contagion. They're part of the problem. And that's the type of show that Brian goes on. Brian, why don't you show you're a man of the people and come to a channel that regular people watch, not all the VC cronies? That's the message I really would like to get out. So, to me, it's hard to know which side's on yet. So
Yeah, I'll say this. I mean, I have a lot of empathy as somebody who runs organizations myself, right? Like I have a lot of empathy for somebody who's in that position of like, I have a responsibility to my shareholders, my stockholders. I'm a public company now. I have my employees to think about. I'm in the crosshairs of every regulator because we are the largest US based company in this particular space. I
wow.
represent this, that, and the other. Like,
Yeah.
it's a lot of responsibility. You can't really come out publicly and take some kind of antagonistic position. He doesn't have the same leverage as somebody like Elon Musk to come and just be like, I'll buy Twitter, screw it. Like, I'll have my own media outlet where I get $2 million in earned media every day just from pressing the tweet button. He doesn't have that kind of leverage. He's not trying to fight people head on. What he's trying to do, when you say play both sides, I understand why it comes off that way, and it's hard to avoid it coming off that way when you're trying to speak to everybody, and you have to find a way to talk to regulators at the same time you're talking to your customers, and they think totally differently. But for me, that's not playing both sides. What it is you're trying to be a translator, you're trying to be a leader, you're trying to find the truth of things so that you can continue. You're playing the infinite game, right? Not the finite game of like, I need to win this interaction. Like SBF is a finite game player. He had to win every interaction. They had to make money on everything they were doing. That's how hedge fund, I used to be in the HFT space, right? So the high frequency traders, these Jane Street guys, they think the same way. It's like, I'm going to win every interaction. It's zero sum. Brian's not a zero sum thinker. Jesse's not a zero sum thinker. They are thinking about that long-term pie. What looks like playing both sides now is really just thinking about, how do I make sure this pie is as big as possible in the future? They're not worried about slicing it up today. If they were worried about slicing it up today, they would have been like SBF was doing, like trying to get those no action letters, trying to lock everybody else out of the industry. I think they're really still thinking from that perspective. And I think their actions that we see, we're never going to see 100% of their actions, but we've seen enough to know that I think that's where they're coming from. And as we learn more over time, I think we're going to learn more that's going to make us respect people in Brian's position and the impact they've had on the industry. We're going to see them in a more positive light, and we're going to appreciate sort of the impossible position that they've been placed in. The more people like SBF make people like him look bad, the harder
Yeah.
it's going to be for him to do what he wants to do for
Yeah.
the industry.
Yeah, and I really want to point out, just moving back to definitely appreciate your comments on that. We'll move back to the gatekeeping conversation. I just want to make one more note on that, and then we can wrap up. When I say gatekeeping, I don't mean regulation. I
Okay.
do mean our media voices, and I mean like all of us that have large followings, and it's not just YouTubers. I mean, obviously, they're Vital Buterin. He's got a large following,
Right.
and CZ's got the biggest following in crypto, I think. Michael Saylor hates everything but Bitcoin and Litecoin now, apparently. So, but the whole
Yeah.
thing is like, it's up to us to call this stuff out, and we can no longer be to the point where it's, hey, institutions are here. That's great for us. Like, no, that's not great for the direction of this. Like, yeah, it's good for your pocket in the temporary, but guess what? They're always going to steal your money back. That's what these hedge funds and these VCs and these institutions do. They're going to do it however they need to do it. They're going to try to take the money from you. So even if we get a short-term bull rally and prices go up and they pump it, they're going to use you as exit liquidity, So we've got to speak up. Like, that's why, like, I'm going hard at Kevin O'Leary right now. We don't want that guy in crypto. I don't want those traditional guys in crypto. They're bad for the space because they bring those traditional finance values, which are all the things we hate about the way money works, and they bring it into our space. And so I mean, we need to call them out. We got to take a much bigger leadership role. So just wanted to point that out. We have some regulation we're looking at, which I'll tell you about after we hit pause on this recording. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I think it's been very insightful. The more we look under the cover, behind the curtains on what was going on with FTX, I think the more people appreciate and understand the fight that we've been taking on here. So, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, anything else you want to end with here?
I appreciate the opportunity. It sounds like I'll be seeing you down in Miami. We're going down for Decentral. Secret's a sponsor. I think you'll be there, so that's awesome. We'll get a chance to talk a little bit more. I can share some more stuff. And yeah, if people are interested in I always say, like, people are in a place right now probably where they're just like, so what does crypto even stand for?
Yeah.
What do I even stand for? Like, right, what can I be doing? I think that what you can be doing if you want to stay in the space is fine. Not everybody's going to be like, I'm going to learn to code a smart contract.
Of course.
Like, most people aren't going to do that, but they do care about crypto and what it's supposed to represent. Find a project that represents your ethos. If you are passionate about protecting privacy as a human right and things like that, Secret is a great home. But if you're passionate about other things like more democratized finance and you want to look into that stuff, just find a project that has your ethos, commit to it. Find a person in the media, not because you want to worship them, but because you trust them to cover things fairly. Work with them, help them uncover these stories. There's a lot that we as individuals can be doing to, again, bring truth back into the equation, be that kind of gatekeeper, not because we want to stop people from entering the space, but because we want to have this sort of filter on in a way where we're filtering out the impetus to always make money all the time on the things that we're doing. Instead, we maximize for the truth of the matter, because the truth will be true no matter what we do. Money comes and goes.
Yeah, I couldn't say that any better. I love the way you put that about the gatekeepers. It's like, look, if there's a fire in an apartment, like, you should probably say there's a fire in the apartment, so everybody else doesn't get killed. That's the kind of thing we're really looking at, trying to remove those wildfires and your con men and your bad actors from the space. So, well, thank you so much for coming on. Definitely going to see you down in Miami. Excited about that. And to everybody else, you guys so much for watching. That's all I got. Be blessed. BitBoy out.